GM.
GM.
GM all the way around. Guys, this is a 5 o'clock panel on a Friday. We're going to have a great time. It's 5 o'clock right here. Infrastructure versus applications. If you haven't heard this debate, you've been living under a rock. We're going to be talking about it some more. Generally from the perspective of no one really cares whether it's an infrastructure or app. Yeah? Consensus view?
All right, cool.
Okay. Wise man once said, one man's infrastructure is another man's app. I made that up. That was me. Very wise. Thank you. Okay, cool. So we've got varying degrees of businesses and projects and technologies on the panel here. I think some of these are more geared consumer-facing. Maybe some of them are more business-facing. You know, generally, like, is that the pendulum here? Infrastructure versus apps has been done so many times over. Are we really talking about more consumer-facing versus more like B2B focused business models? Generally, when you guys are thinking about what makes something infrastructure versus what makes an application, like, what is the mindset? I think that's really the key here thing. Like, what is the mindset of an infrastructure project versus the mindset of an application project, given that, you know, sometimes projects can fluctuate between those? Go ahead.
I think it's B2B versus B2C. Like, you selling to devs or you selling to people?
Awesome. Yeah? Consensus?
Like the game of building for users, the consumer psychology is really complicated and not internally consistent. Whereas like as an infrastructure project, it's actually very much easier to think through the incentives. But on the consumer side, you actually have to go get feedback from like actual users and iterate to get a PMF. It's like a very different like process to like successfully build out a product.
Should we make this spicy?
Do it.
All right, don't you have to do that with devs as well?
Is a good question. It's probably better if you do, but given how shitty the EVM is, I don't think there's any like interviews at all done on the developer side, and yet it has like massive adoption in this space. It's kind of like grandfathered in, I'd say. So you can have like strong network effects that like defeat making devs happy, right? But it's probably better if you do the same sort of process with devs. So like if you take Eigenlayer, for example, is like a great example here. It's just like you identified an opportunity to like for people to minimize their minimize opportunity cost, and they had like billions of dollars of like restaked ETH before anyone was building anything, right? It's just like the nature of infrastructure.
They also raised 100 mil from Andreessen Horowitz. So good. I mean, I was farming it for like I've been working with Eigenlayer for almost 3 years now, and like I was farming it not because I cared about contributing to the network, but honestly because I just wanted the tokens.
Yeah, so it's much easier to think through the incentives, right?
Sure.
Okay.
All right.
No, I'm not
All I'm
disagreeing
saying
with
here is one huge problem in this industry is we don't iterate and we don't listen to customers, and we end up building vaporware. And we've been doing that. I've been here for like 8 years, and I've seen so much fucking vaporware at this point, and it's really just like, I don't know, a waste. A lot of VC capital has gone to a place where it's just like people go down a road and they just build something for 3 years. They don't listen to people. They just ride narratives, and it ends up they just build vaporware. It doesn't push the space forward. And so, I mean, this is, and I'm not like saying I'm better than other devs. I have made this mistake for years. My entire first company, I made this mistake literally for like 3 years. And so what we've found recently is we've started to do this pretty aggressively with the SDK that we're building, and it's making sense. We're actually like getting developer feedback, and we're seeing some pretty positive momentum there.
So I guess I'm a founder of Opacity. We specialize in zk-TLS, just like making the existing internet interoperable with blockchains. I got obsessed with this because I got into crypto when I was 16 years old, but crypto has not actually solved the problem for people beyond like speculation and stable coins, right? So I did like a deep first principles analysis and came to the conclusion that a lack of verifiability in the world is like what's limiting crypto use cases. And I'd argue like we validated our thesis because we have like apps that hit number 2 in like the iOS App Store, and the users of those apps don't even know that there's like crypto underlying it. It just solves a problem for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. For what's worth, I'm pretty hyped on Opacity.
But that's application using infrastructure, right?
Yeah. So we're
So like we're debating one or the other, but in the end, both go together. You can't have one without the other.
This is true, but I guess zk-TLS is in a unique spot where we need the user to log in. Like as a first step, you need the cooperation of the user. So,
but that's for anything, even in the Web 2 space.
Yeah. But my point is, like, we're infrastructure, but we could really only focus on consumer-facing things.
Exactly. Yeah. Your infrastructure, but we all benefit from having consumers interacting with technology in a way that's habitual for them, right? Like traditional crypto is kind of taking users from the Web 2 space, but telling them, okay, but fuck the habits you have. You're going to learn how to use something that's completely different. And yeah, there's financial incentives. You can PvP things, or in some cases it's PvE. But we've gotten the bulk of those people are already inside, right? And to get to the next stage of people, you have to do exactly what you guys are doing.
Yeah, but it's not the fact that they're logging in and it's like a UX that they already know and are familiar with is like the big unlock there. It's like, I worked in decentralized identity before I was a founder of Opacity, like the world of verifiable credentials. There's like many companies that raise tens of millions of dollars of like signed credentials and like decentralized storage of credentials, right? Where you could like get access to it with like a signed wallet. And you can like deliver a similar login experience as like Web 2, but you still can't solve a problem with that setup because there's no incentive for people to sign useful data. So like the real unlock is like opening the floodgates where you can like actually generate proofs on useful information, like how much you're getting paid, for example, if you want to disintermediate like payday lending.
How did you learn that? Did you talk to developers by chance?
No, so
and get product feedback and iterate?
It's actually from personal experience. So I was the first engineer at a demo, it's like a Deepin project, like a decentralized car network, and we had a lot of exciting ideas around like using DeFi for like car insurance or like car loans, right? But if you sat down and like tried to actually build it, you couldn't do it. It wasn't really clear why you couldn't do it, but it's like the hardest thing to see in life is the thing that's not there, but if it was there, it'd make your life easier. And what I'd identified was a lack of verifiable data. The fact that you can't really prove that you like own a particular car or that you already have car insurance or like what your history of it is, just like really limits how useful it could be on a blockchain.
I feel like this is the most interesting panel I've been on all week, so thank you for engaging with this so far. Robbie, you want to throw in some more spice?
If I can just hop in, but to agree with you, the whole reason that these things work is because at the app level, you can take the infrastructure that allows people to come in and do all these things and be in a more PvE scenario than PvP, but it's because the app level functions. Like something like Signal would never work if you were asking people to jump through hoops, right? So if you want to get net new users on chain now, because we've kind of exhausted the amount of people who are coming on, unless the consumer interface or the user experience is akin to what they're used to, like it's as intuitive or as habitual to what they're used to doing, you lose them. And that's why the app is it's the overall interface that allows you to get new people on board. Otherwise, it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, I mean, most consumers are pretty stupid, and I include myself in that, by the way.
But they're lazy.
Yeah, we really lazy, and we make decisions quickly. Like, Plaid is a great example here, where like the way they started is they run a browser in the cloud, they ask for your bank login, and they'd like automate a browser logging in for you. And if they directly ask that question to you, you're not going to hand over your login, but because you had the choice between like giving up your login and doing something immediately versus like giving your bank account number and your routing number and like getting small deposits and verifying it a few days later, and you're just automatically going to go for the faster option. Even if I directly asked you for your login, you'd say no, right? This is like the complexity of consumer psychology, so I agree with you. But at the end of the day, you could make like decentralized identity as good of a UX as you want to, but like the whole thesis of our company is you'd still want to be able to solve a problem for people, but you want to optimize as much as you can to make it as easy as possible for users, where they don't have to understand that there's like anything, like they don't know there's a difference between like AWS behind it versus like some
Exactly.
AWS.
Exactly.
Yeah. Net new. And this is ultimately going to appeal to net new users. Like you said, we've exhausted these. I'm thinking about the convergence of infrastructure and applications, and primarily in this context of Web3 blockchain, crypto-based applications and infrastructures, that these are financialized, and therefore we turn these networks into markets. And in many such cases, we have, whether it's infrastructure or an application, we can refer to both of those as marketplaces, where we've got supply on one side, we've got demand on the other side. Sometimes it's B2B, sometimes it's B2C, sometimes it's developer to developer. But ultimately, all of these are essentially marketplaces. Would you guys each say that it's fair to describe your respective projects as a marketplace?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would never sell it like that, but yeah, I'd agree with the assessment.
Well, look, flowers where credit where credit is due. Earnify did reach top 2 in the App Store. You know, this is one of the more successful things that we've seen reach consumers at a broad scale. Okay, you won't sell it, but this is a closed room. There's only, you know, we're a tight family in here. You know, this won't leave the room. What is the supply and demand side of the marketplace?
For our project specifically, or for Earnify?
For Earnify.
Okay, so for Earnify, well, there's different ways you could build it. You could actually build Earnify purely in a centralized way, where they're just they're disintermediating the payday lending market, or actually a more techie version of it called earned wage access, where based on how many in your payroll system, how many hours you're working, you can access those wages early, but it's predatory interest rates, right? If you because it's a good value extraction position, right? The user has no choice but one provider. If the user can simply just prove the data themselves, right, just by logging in, and then go on chain, you could source it in a decentralized way, where you have a market for providing liquidity and then the demand on the consumer side for accessing their wages early. Or you could just go get the credit line yourself from a bank and provide the liquidity as well, and the users wouldn't know the difference between it. It depends on how you plan to build the product out in the long term.
And generally, when you're thinking about building out a marketplace and bootstrapping both supply and demand side, is there any general truths you would suggest to those building markets that helps build a thriving supply and demand side of the marketplace?
You want to be building painkillers and not vitamins. You want a solution where you really can't live without it, right? Incrementally better really doesn't cut it in the consumer world these days. For Earnify, you have the choice between a 300% interest rate or for free, right? It's pretty clear which one you're going to choose. But the general pattern that I've also noticed in our ecosystem specifically is the stuff that's grown really quickly and had a lot of success. There's some intermediated market in the world today, but it turns out if you go through the user versus going through the intermediary, you can make it more efficient. And because of those efficiencies, it could be cheaper. The influencers make more money.
You're almost crowdsourcing data.
Yeah,
by going through the user.
You just need the user to log in, right? That's the only requirement that we have for this to work. As long as you're building something compelling enough to convince them to log in, it'll work.
And Seb, you guys are also doing ZK TLS. Is there any learnings and things that you can also apply to the marketplace? Is it the same supply and demand side of this?
I think leveraging from what you were saying, the first use case of crypto is the financial use case, right? And with DeFi and all of these things, it's very, you need to be a bit advanced to understand how these things work and leverage them. But further and further, we're going to iterate, and I know it's a taboo word, but things are being
not taboo.
No, but
it should.
Yeah.
It should
you know,
not be taboo.
things are being iterated to make the user experiences much easier to try and find new solutions. But in your case, right, with Earnify, it's a financial use case. It's 300% versus 0%, and the more and more you're allowing people to take habits that they have, tech is part of everything in your daily life, right? Your music, how you're entertained, how you travel, and data is everywhere. And if this data can be sort of monetized in a way, whether it's through marketers, through loyalty, through social recognition, there's a multitude of things that ZK TLS opens up a relationship between the Web2 user and crypto. And then I think if you build a very digestible application on top of this, you're successful. This is why I pushed my team to start investigating and researching ZK TLS as much as possible, because as a network, every successful network kind of is defined by one piece of tech that makes it special, and then it builds infrastructure that allows others to launch stuff on top of, right? So Eigen, with restaking, like pump fund for Solana, POL, even though it doesn't exist for Barachain, like all, you know what I mean? So for us, I want to
Shots fired.
build, but it's just the truth. I'm building sort of like a social database on Sophon and then trying to get people to build stuff on top of that, right? Where deep, but always a very deep focus on having like a very clean UI experience that the end user can understand.
Yeah, and we've talked about this. You know, this is essentially the idea of a social oracle, right? And there's quite a few applications there. Let's go. I saw both of you guys kind of raise your mics. Let's go Austin and then Hersh.
All right, I have a pretty left curve response to how do you build up a marketplace. So before we built Omni, we built a DeFi protocol, and I was hustling for months to try to get both sides of this marketplace filled out. Since then, we raised a bunch of money, and now with Omni, you can basically think about it like Robinhood and Citadel. What Omni does is it just makes it so that people can use applications even if their money is held on a different chain. They just click the button, and from their perspective, it just magically gets teleported there. How does that actually happen? It's just like Robinhood and Citadel. In Robinhood, you click the button. You don't think about Citadel actually fulfilling your order, but behind the scenes, some sophisticated market participant is going and doing that. So how are we bootstrapping this marketplace? We're Citadel. We raised a bunch of money. We're going to run the initial solver. And it's nice because now I have a bunch of solvers in my DMs trying to join this network. And so that's just how we're going about this initially.
Hersh?
Well, so we're an eigenlayer AVS, like providing ZK TLS as like an infrastructure level solution for people building consumer apps. And so we need node operators and like restake ETH to like, and our protocol becomes more secure the more nodes that you run. And the other side of the market is getting users, like developers, but also like they need like users to be successful ultimately, right? And in general, I think you should focus on, I'd be curious to get people's takes here, on whichever is the hardest part of the market to like get adoption for first. And there's way more users that you need in our like case, so we've prioritized that versus like expanding our node operator set because you need to convince less of them to be successful versus like you may need like millions of users like using products on top of the infrastructure.
You're saying that's the harder problem to solve, and so it's more important to solve that problem first and tackle the easy one later?
100%, yeah. If like we're only successful if we run into use cases that have like a recurring use. Like if what we found is like for the lifetime, the use cases where for the lifetime of the user, there's like one proof generated, we'd probably like return investor money because it's just like the economics aren't going to work in that case.
And that is a common thread in crypto where most of these markets are financialized. People are coming here, the users are coming here to make money in most of the cases. And there's subsidies that come out for every new project. So you see this constant, I go to the new thing, and then I leave the old thing because it's no longer subsidizing my consumer behavior, my use. So how do you guys build that reflexivity, that like returning to this same platform over and over again, building a sticky user? How do you guys leverage your marketplace to keep users coming back?
Create something more valuable than a farm. Simple answer. Like, and honestly, this is a huge reason why like farms are just not good for going to market in general because you have no idea. Like, are people using your protocol because they know you raised a bunch of money and they're farming your tokens because they know you're going to launch one? You have no fucking clue. So, like, I actually think that's like a bad way to go to market.
So, in our case, it's like the sticky, like the actual product behavior around the user. It's not built by us. We just like support the teams that actually solve that hard problem. But like, I'm an empiricist. Fundamentally, it's like a philosophy I will die by.
Break down empiricism for us. Just
Yeah, let's get philosophical here.
Well, I'll give it to you in a practical form. So. I have very simple North Star metrics and I have charts of that, like weekly active users, monthly active users on our network, right? And every morning, the first thing I do before I check Telegram, before I check Twitter, I look at that chart, then I compare it to my calendar, and anything on my calendar that doesn't impact that chart, I throw it the fuck out. And I just spend most of my time impacting these simple metrics that I know is like how I'm ultimately successful, right? It's like the game of how do you optimize your time.
tunnel vision. Seb, anything on here?
For me, it's focusing on PvE exercises versus PvP. So like I said, crypto for me is still a place where the financial use case is the first one. But if we take the main reason why a lot of people use crypto, which is speculation, take the biggest speculative market in the world, which is the lottery. People play the lottery, some play every day, some play once a week, some people buy a scratch card at lunchtime. Nobody ever spends money on a scratch card, like scratches, loses, and goes like, fuck the scratch card, I'm never playing again. This is a rug. No, they'll just play again the next day because they've kind of decided how much they wanted to spend. They're mentally okay with it, and sometimes they win, sometimes they might not. Versus in a PvP scenario, you bought some token that some KOL shielded you, you lost, and then they're like, fuck this, I'm never going on Solana again, and I'm never doing this again. Both are speculative. Both have equally the same amount of odds of working out, but one has people playing over and over again when you build in those types of mentalities, and the other, like, you end up in the kind of market we're in now where people are just exhausted.
Why do you, that is a fascinating psychological observation. Like the fact that when something is PvE, we don't really have anyone to direct our like anger from loss at, and therefore we just continue to play because it's diffused amongst the whole. Austin's laughing. Why are you laughing?
Just your commentary is funny.
I love you, Austin. And so this kind of diffuses amongst the whole market, and it's almost like because there's no one to get mad at, you just continue to play the game, right? This is the way to build reflexive and recurring user base.
It's belief that you can still win.
Okay.
I think, but the problem with meme coins, and I mean, I've traded my fair share of meme coins, right? So I'm guilty in this, but the problem with meme coins is that people always believe they're gonna like, this is the make it play, like just one more click and like, I'm gonna make it because everybody else did. But statistically, you don't, right? And the thing is like all of those people who were sort of quote unquote onboarded in the last 6 to 9 months through Moonshot or Phantom, they're not onboarded to crypto, right? I mean, we spoke to this when we did our episode. Yeah. Statistically, they're losing money and they're doing nothing else on chain. Yeah. So did you really onboard these people? No, like you've onboarded more people.
Yeah.
And you have repeat customers.
On that note, I'd say like coming back to empiricism, probably the biggest problem, in my opinion, that we have in blockchain is we actually cannot measure daily active users, monthly active users. Like we have no idea how many users are on Ethereum or on Solana, right? Because like a wallet address is not a good sense of like humanity. And so...
but an account is, there's a nuance between wallets and account. Not to solve chills, but like we're building something more on the side of an account and having a home where people log into daily, and like you can come up with quests and different type of things for users to come back on a daily basis, right? Roll the dice every day. Again, it doesn't have to be speculative, but you can, like, you need to build things that try to get people's attention to go back regularly.
Okay. So the difference here is that there's some caricature of identity that's built around that wallet address so that it becomes more than a wallet address. It becomes this account that has characteristics of the end user. That's a more human form for this. Ultimately, that is a better diagram of this user psychology. Would you guys say that like in both infrastructure and applications, it's important to build these networks in such a way that they are PvE?
One interesting comment just on this prior thing of like tracking users. I talked with Rock from ether.fi. I'm bummer we don't have Mike here, but one thing that I thought was super interesting that they said is anytime a whale deposits into ether.fi, they go hunt them down. They literally go like try to dox them, and they reach out to them and they like get customer feedback from them. And so yeah, it's a super hard problem, like knowing who is actually using your protocol and like are these all different people or is this one just like Sybil farm? But yeah, I thought that was fascinating that Rock said that earlier, that they go like literally try to dox their users just so they can get user feedback.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, but our focus is more on the developer side, and like if we find like a team that's like we're really bullish on that's building a zk-TLS use case, I'll have like multiple calls a week with them regularly, like really hands-on, and just like trying to assess like what their pain points are, how can we help them, and so just like for them to be ultimately successful. And then you can take that feedback. There's like an art to like, you don't want to directly ask people like what you want them, like what you should build for them. There's like, you have to like do it indirectly, I find is like better. But yeah, you need feedback from the market. That's how you get PMF. That's like the definition of PMF.
Yeah. Okay. Ultimately, yeah, market feedback here is going to help with both infrastructure and applications. We're kind of abstracting that away and more so thinking about networks and markets and how we can develop supply, demand, and bootstrap these networks. As we kind of wrap up here, there's this recurring idea of bringing users back, keeping them in this system. How are you guys thinking about like the dynamics of these markets so that you end up with maximizing the network effects, maximizing the people that end up coming in, and they end up kind of like self-sustaining and growing on their own? I think we've seen, so many times where people come in, they do some PvP type thing, and they sort of slash the rest of the user base that's in that game. So how do you guys think about building a market or a network that has some intrinsic network effects in and of itself that will continue to flywheel outward and attract new users, new liquidity?
Yeah, so for us right now, basically this front-end SDK, you've probably heard of cross-chain dApps, right? Like this was chilled for years, Wormhole, Layer 0, both raised over 100 mil to build like cross-chain dApps. This never worked because it's too complex to do this. If you're a smart contract developer, you're gonna take like 6 months to re-architect your protocol, pay another 100 grand to get audits, and like, no, you probably don't even have product market fit. You're not gonna do that. And so that's why we designed this SDK so that just a week to integrate this front-end SDK. What we're doing is Symbiotic, this other restaking protocol that we're working with, we're going to market with them, and we're like, the success of our product depends upon how well they do. And so we might even give incentives when they initially get this live in the next like month or so here. And so we might like push out Omni through their protocol, because then we can take the data that like, hey, when you actually integrate this protocol, this Symbiotic expanded from Ethereum L1 to all these different rollups. They've gotten feedback that users want to use their protocol, but they don't want to deal with bridging. And so our goal there is really just like get good numbers, show that it actually makes a delta on their growth, and then take that to subsequent prospects that we're talking to.
Awesome. What went into the decision between the restaking providers when you were going through this, thinking about EigenLayer, thinking about Symbiotic? What ultimately led you to the decision that you made?
I mean, we're also working with EigenLayer right now, so like I'll help anybody.
Cool. And so the idea is to broaden those horizons and extend that infrastructure in your particular interface for both of those. You can leverage as many as you like.
Yeah, I mean, Omni, like people will never think about Omni when they use Omni. They'll just go to an application and they'll realize that no longer do they have to leave the application to go bridge. And so like this can apply to any application, and some of the biggest protocols right now are restaking protocols, so we're hunting them.
Awesome. Okay, now I also want to probably wrap on this question, which is that applications and infrastructure have this very complementary but very intertwined sort of relationship between the two. Like you just mentioned, you guys have an application and then there's infrastructure that helps to power it. Same thing with EarnifI, same thing with Sophon. So this actually stems from a question that we had on the podcast, which was a conclusion that was like, what happens when an application kind of outgrows its infrastructure? Like, you kind of have this almost like hierarchical type of dynamic where, the application kind of is somewhat dependent on the infrastructure. But every once in a while, you could have this one killer application. That's what all the ecosystem infrastructure providers are trying to hunt for. What happens when it ends up superseding this infrastructure? Do you have like this cannibalistic relationship then? Or what ends up happening?
You launch a token.
Yeah, you launch your own chain, and then you launch a token. That's what you do. Yeah, or that's not what.
And then you don't have to come to
like,
Denver
that's what people do,
to shill your stuff.
Or just another VC round. But yeah, I mean, we've seen that a lot of times. Like people kind of like feel the constraints of their original environment, and they scale up. They build their own platform, whether it's a chain, an L2, an L3. And a big reason for this is like sovereignty of just like, I need to be able to control the like underlying stack so that I can build what I want.
Yeah,
that's my less cynical answer here.
Right. So that's the app chain life cycle. That's the play. Like, you launch a contract on an L1, you get some product market fit, bit of a community and a user base. You launch your own app chain. From there, you kind of bootstrap even further. You launch a token, or sometimes a stable coin, grab some monetary premium, some mimetic premium, and then you continue to expand from there and start to develop your own ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean like Unichain, right? Like they grew from a smart contract to now they're their own chain.
Yeah. Frax is another example that I'm thinking about here.
Yeah.
They were a smart contract. They were just deployed on the L1. They ended up launching their own app chain, and then now they're continuing to build out their suite of products. Almost, as these markets start to supersede one another, they start to kind of envelope their previous one, and then you can start to see how the game theory and the power dynamics between these markets starts to shift.
These are really good problems to have, but they're not proven. Like, I don't know that Unichain or Frax, the Frax chain are going to be, or like what the plan is for those folks to really scale it up, right? Like, is Uniswap going to come out with like a better version of their mobile wallet, and then everything is automatically routed through the Unichain, and then all of the hooks, for instance, go through that? Like, that's yet to be proven, right? And if it works, then it's a good problem to have.
In some sense, Uniswap was able to create this dynamic between elements of themselves. Like, now you have the Unichain deployment of Uniswap competing, in a sense, with all the other deployments of Uniswap across all the other chains. And so they were able to create their own, like, game theory where it's not cannibalistic because, of course, the entire thing helps Uniswap as a whole.
I'll bet any amount of money it was like the VCs who kind of forced them to do that. Is probably not like an internal decision. That's my analysis of the situation. It's like a very VC thing.
I think I disagree with that. Like, it's been years since they launched the token. I'd be very surprised if they launched Unichain because their VC said, give me a fucking chain. Like, that's just, I feel like they're playing bigger games than that.
I mean, the Uniswap token was like a reactionary thing against like the Sushi Swap vampire attack. I don't think the tokenomics actually made that much sense.
Well, yeah, there was the fee switch wasn't turned on. So.
Yeah.
But there's still the fee switch. Like,
that would never be turned on. So the interesting thing there is MetaMask made like way more money on Uniswap than Uniswap did in the beginning when they threw like a 0.85% like swap fee on the UI.
yeah.
And users will happily pay that. But through governance, you're not going to get people to vote for turning on the fee switch. I really doubt it.
Yeah, and I think this is why Uniswap has launched a mobile wallet. I think it's why they're monetizing in the front end as well. People are in this industry are starting to understand whoever owns the customer relationship is going to be the one that makes the money. The whole fat protocol thesis, it was wrong. You're the furthest away from the customer if you're at the bottom of the stack.
So the app matters. The application layer matters.
Fuck infrastructure.
Fuck infrastructure.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for
Thank you,
listening.
everybody.